If I told you my life changed in a moment, you would picture a single flash, a car crash, a shouted name, a falling chandelier. That's not what happened to me. My life changed in 3 steps. 3 small, ordinary steps on a subway platform. 3 steps between a closed door and an orange seat. 3 steps between keeping my head down and looking up. There was nothing cinematic about it. No thunderclap, no obvious sign. Just cold air, fluorescent lights, someone else's warmth left behind on a seat, and the decision to pick up something I knew I shouldn't touch. When I reached for that phone, I expected a nuisance, a missed call, a frantic message, maybe an apology. What I found instead was a shape, not a message, but a memory that fit inside my hand like a small, dangerous thing. And it fit me too, in a way I hadn't been willing to fit anything in years. You can say I was curious. You can say I was lonely. Both are true, but neither explains the way my chest tightened when I felt the glass still warm from another person's grip. Neither explains why for a second I felt connected to someone I had never met. So before I tell you everything that came after, I want you to hold one image in your mind. A train, an empty car, a small black phone, glow fading to black, a girl who was supposed to be safe, standing with a choice she didn't know how to refuse. If you were there, would you walk away? If you were there, would you keep it? Don't answer yet, because the real question is this. If you make that choice, that tiny, harmless choice, what will you be willing to do later to keep the secret? How far will you go to protect what you've taken, even from yourself? That is the story I can't stop telling myself, not because I want you to feel pity, but because I need you to understand how ordinary, small moments can demand everything from you. Listen carefully. I am telling you this one truth first. You won't see the edge until you've already stepped past it. My childhood looked like a museum. White walls, expensive frames, people who clapped on cue. Affection was a ledger entry. Love was a line item. Plans were spreadsheets. That was the only vocabulary my father used. He prepared a life for me like someone preparing an exhibit, arranged pieces, polished surfaces, perfect lighting. University, internship, marriage to a man chosen from a country club directory. A future so tidy it felt suffocating. I learned to survive inside that frame. I smiled the programmed smiles. I nodded at the rehearsed conversations. I learned to file my desires in the same drawer where one stores winter scarves, out of sight, folded away. Then I found sanctuary in books, not the textbook kind, real books, poetry that said things no one at my table would ever say aloud. Yeats, Plath, Rilke, voices that let a heart be messy and still true. It was the smallest rebellion I could afford. I sat in the back rows of a cavernous lecture hall and refused to look at the life that was waiting for me outside those doors. Professor Julian Vance taught as if he had been trained to cut away soft language. He was exacting, stern, unforgiving. He carried himself as if every sentence mattered and nothing could be wasted. Students called him the Iron Professor because he demanded a kind of reckoning most of us were not prepared to give. But there was a seam in him. When he read aloud, the hardness softened. A rare tone slipped in that made his voice sound like confession. That is what first pulled me in, the contrast between the armor and the vulnerability beneath. I never expected to see him off campus, not crying on a subway at midnight. He was there the night I found the phone. The rain was the kind that erases everything soft. The car was nearly empty. He sat across from me, sleeves damp, head in his hands. When he rose suddenly and left the phone behind, the doors hissed shut and I was alone with the small black thing that had been pressed against his palm. It was warm. Some choices require a reason. This one didn't. It just happened. Maybe I needed to be needed. Maybe I wanted to touch a human moment that didn't belong to my arranged life. Maybe I was curious in a way that felt like hunger. The screen lit with one reminder: visit the grave, 5 years today. I put it in my coat. I'd told myself I'd return it. I told myself I would be reasonable and responsible. I told myself many things that were not true. When I went to his office the next morning, he was unraveling. He searched drawers like a man looking for a life he had misplaced. When I placed the phone on his desk, the room did something to me I hadn't felt in years. He looked at the object as if it were a wound. When his fingers brushed mine as he took it back, the guilt and something else, curiosity perhaps, or recognition, lit between us. After that, small things began to happen. Books appeared on my desk with passages underlined, a copy of Rilke left on a chair, notes scribbled in the margins as a way of speaking when speech itself was forbidden by title and rules. We started to talk through pages and emails, code built from literature. I sent a late-night message about a line. He answered minutes later. Those emails were a kind of private weather. They changed the atmosphere in my house. They shifted the pattern of my days. I began measuring time by when his reply would come. I began to prefer the possibility of his note to the dull certainty of dinner conversations where objectives were read aloud like legislation. We didn't say the obvious things, we circled them. We spoke about grief as if it were an object to be analyzed, then slipped personal confessions into footnotes. I told him about the cage my father had built. He told me a truth he would not say aloud, that 5 years earlier a life had left him, taken in a way he could not repair. At first it was intellectual, then it became an exchange of presence, a glance in class that lasted one breath too long, a book left on a desk like a small folded message. Each small risk wound us tighter. Then I crossed a line I had promised myself I wouldn't cross. I went to his apartment. The city was sleet and wind. I told my father I was studying. I lied with the kind of lightness that becomes easier to carry when you know a secret could set you free. I pressed the buzzer because I needed to see him outside the safety of the lecture hall. Inside his apartment, the smell of paper and cere softened him in a way the podium never did. We were interrupted. A neighbor, the dean, stopped by for a drink. He banged on the door. For a heart-stopping minute, we were both aware of how obvious our crime would look. A student at a professor's apartment, wet and unaccompanied. I hid in his closet while men drank scotch and made small talk in the living room. My chest pressed into coats that smelled at him, felt as if it would tear. When the danger passed, the closet door opened and he reached for me. His hands were shaking. He told me to leave. He told me he was too old, too damaged. I told him I didn't want safe. I told him I wanted honest. We kissed because the space between two honest people is often the only place to breathe. After that, things accelerated. I stopped going to internship interviews. My studies slipped. My father, an expert reader of people, noticed. He noticed how I flinched when Harrison touched my hand at holiday dinners. He noticed the late-night phone usage. He noticed the emails. Then the paper trail arrived like an accusation in print. My father found billing statements with hours highlighted between 1 and 4 in the morning. He confronted me in the study, calm and precise. He offered the ultimatum: tell me his name and I will fix it. Protect him and you are cut out. No inheritance, no school, no family. You don't need my voice to know how that choice sounds. It is a blade wearing the shape of a promise. I stood there and thought of his life, of the way he had wrapped himself in duty and grief. I thought of the way he had given up everything when the rumor machine started to spin. I looked at my father's hands and the spreadsheet of expectations he had built my life from. I chose. I chose silence. I walked out of the house in 5 minutes with a small suitcase and the books he had given me. I walked into a blizzard and towards the university like someone running toward the wound. When I pounded on his office door, the answer was not what I expected. He was gone, resigned. He had walked into the dean's office that morning and said he had behaved as a man obsessed. He buried himself in that truth to shield me. He burned his career to protect the life I had been raised to accept. On his desk, he left one book. Inside the book was a letter. He told me then in ink that the grave I had seen on that phone belonged not to a wife, but to a daughter. She would have been my age. He said loving me would hollow me out in the same way his daughter's absence hollowed him out. He left to save me. He asked me not to look for him. I finished my degree. I took my place in the firm. I learned to perform the life my father wanted, the corner office, the measured laugh, the polished speeches. I am a partner now. I have everything the people in my childhood thought mattered. I have no husband. I never married. I have money and control and an ability to make the kinds of choices my younger self would have applauded. But at night, I keep a book on my bedside table. Rilke's voice is a small, private echo that is louder than all the applause I ever got. Sometimes I go to the subway and stand where it started. I watch people carry small black rectangles like the keys to their days. Once, recently, a young man dropped his phone. It slid across the floor and stopped at my foot. For a half second, I felt something I had not felt in years, the pull of a doorway that promised other possibilities. I nudged the phone back to him and called out, "Hey, you dropped this." He turned and smiled, innocent and unbroken. "Thanks," he said. "My life is in there." "Keep it close," I said. "Don't let anyone unlock it." I wasn't poetic. I was tired. I was protecting him from the mistakes I had made. What I keep thinking about is simpler than drama. It is this. Some doors are doors to rooms you were never meant to live in. Some secrets are small and harmless, and some are not. You can take them, you can hide them, you can guard them, but there is always a price. When you pick something up that was not yours, you enter a contract without reading it. The terms are written later. They are written with small betrayals, with lies you pretend are gifts, and with goodbyes you do not say out loud. If you want the rest, the small scenes I left out, the near misses that almost broke us, the emails, the exact words from the letter, and how I learned to lie so well my father believed me, I will tell them. I can take you through every late-night message, every library rendezvous, every moment the world almost caught fire. But one last thing before I go on. Nothing about this felt like heroism. It felt urgent and human and selfish and kind in turns. It felt like living in the